Hey YouTube, Untamed here. More likely than not, you have had a negative experience buying a new or used vehicle comparatively to having had a positive experience. More people would rather go get a root canal. They would rather go to the dentist than go buy and negotiate a new vehicle because that experience has just been connected with a ton of trauma for so many people. They're always wondering if they're going to get a good deal. They're wondering if that sales rep is raking them over the coals, if they're taking advantage of them. And oftentimes we feel as though we were taken advantage of. So it should come as no surprise with supply level and inventory levels very, very high across the United States right now and demand levels being very, very low. Well, car salesmen, they're not succeeding. They're not successfully moving that inventory. Selling a vehicle is no longer very easy as it was during the pandemic. In today's video, I'm going to highlight some stats, facts, and figures that are quite alarming and really paint a clear picture as to why so many salesmen are deciding to hang it up. So stick with me. I think a lot of us can agree that the majority of car salesmen of today have become very, very lazy. And that's thanks to the pandemic in the following few years where selling a vehicle has become increasingly easy for them. They put in very little effort and they were still able to move the inventory, right? I mean, the demand was very high, inventory was a little bit lower, so they could sell a vehicle in a heartbeat with little effort involved. And not to mention, it takes very, very little credentials in order to be hired as a car salesman. You could be a high schooler, fresh out of high school, and go get hired by a dealership. Much like being a real estate agent during the height of the pandemic, right? It took very little effort and very little skill in order to sell houses. So, of course, we saw a huge boom of real estate agents coming out with very little credentials, but still successfully selling houses because the market allowed for such. So, a lot of lazy car salesmen throughout the last few years. And let's face it, the job of a car salesman is to maximize their profit margin, right? So whenever they capitalize on selling you these additional bogus packages, protection packages, that windshield chip repair package, the door ding dent package, you name it, they're successfully increasing that profit margin for themselves and the dealership because the vast majority of car salesmen are paid on a commission basis. They still get a little bit of a salary, most of them do, but the bulk of their payments are coming from their car sales, the commissions that they get from each sale. So maximizing profit has always been the name of the game. It is not the fault of the salesmen in general, right? I mean, more often than not, they're just showing up and trying to do their job. It is the fault of the general manager or the sales management of that dealership that are allowing those greedy tactics to unfold. They're allowing for those greedy dealership markups, $10,000 over MSRP, or pushing those inflated protection packages, nitrogen-filled tires with a price tag on it. They're the ones who are really forcing it from the top. So, of course, the fault lies with the top, but the sales reps, they're the ones who develop that false sense of confidence when they're selling and pushing these greedy tactics because during the pandemic, they were able to get away with it. Not so much anymore, and that's why they're hanging it up. And I can't say I feel bad for dealerships, right? I mean, dealerships are the ones who burned so many bridges. We had so many returning customers, loyal customers who had been returning to that dealership, any dealership across the United States for many, many years, sometimes decades throughout their family, within their family, but even they were flicked to the curb. Even they were ignored for the sake of trying to capitalize on the markups that they were trying to deploy. Because thanks to that thing called the World Wide Web, now suddenly it wasn't so much about focusing on your local populace and your local customers who had been returning for years, but instead rather they opened it up to folks coming in from California with more money than brains and paying these inflated price tags, taking away from their loyal customers locally, right? And now, ironically enough, they need their loyal customers more than ever, but they're nowhere to be found. And what I hated most is these markups and greedy tactics, especially throughout the pandemic in the last few years, really brought out the worst in salesmen, right? It almost brought out an ugly level of arrogance. You would often be met with, hey, if you're not willing to pay the $5,000 or $10,000 markup, that's fine. The next guy will. If you don't buy it, somebody else will. And they treated you like a brick in the wall. They treated you just like another number. And that's what I hated most. Buying a vehicle is the second largest purchase a person will make in their entire lifetime, only second to buying a home or a house, right? So why not make it a positive experience? Heaven forbid a dealership really focused on that, focused on earning that person as a returning customer. Had we seen more of that during the pandemic? Well, I think a lot of dealerships would find themselves in a much better position right now. And let's face it, banking institutions and lenders are equally to blame. Their irresponsible lending practices make it so we found ourselves in this position. They're the ones who are offering these 150 to up to 170% LTV loan-to-value loans, these inflated loans on vehicles that were worth nowhere near that much. pretending a dealership was selling a $100,000 Cadillac Escalade and slapped it with a $25,000 markup after taxes, some other bogus fees, and extended warranty protection packages, it would bring it up well over 150 grand. And well, thanks for offering those loans for that $100,000 vehicle, $150,000, which makes 0 sense. They're setting that customer up for failure. And because of that, it should come as no surprise that we saw an unprecedented growth rate of the number of repos, the number of repossessions that have taken place within the United States over the last year and a half. From 2023 to 2024, we saw a 23% uptick in the number of vehicles that were repossessed. In 2023, we had 1.5 million vehicles that were repossessed within the United States. In 2024, 1.85 million. They're projecting 2.1 million for 2025. Kind of insane, huh? A dealership's job is to maximize their profit. And because of that, they did the markups, of course, but they also would line their lots with highly specced, highly trimmed examples, highly trimmed vehicles, because the vehicles that have a ton of bells and whistles and creature comforts in it, like the Platinums of the world, the TRD Pros, all these higher specced examples have a much higher profit margin comparatively to the base model bare bones examples. The SR5 does not have as much of a profit margin compared to a TRD Pro or Trail Hunter. Right? An XL version of the F-150 has a much smaller profit margin compared to a Platinum or Limited. I mean, you get a sense of that when you look at their discounts on their lots right now. You go see an F-150 Limited or F-150 Platinum, they'll be coming with an $8,000 to $12,000 off discount. But if you go look and find an XL, one priced right around $55,000, they're going to be maybe discounting at $5,000, $6,000. That profit margin is much smaller, and that's why there's a smaller discount applied. Prior to the pandemic, many dealerships would focus on selling quantity, the number of vehicles. If they can sell off a ton of vehicles at a smaller profit margin, it would still mean for a huge level of success for the dealership. Not only are they earning returning customers because they feel like they got a decent deal, but what did that mean for the service department? We had a lot more people going to the service department, and well, talk to any dealership, they'll tell you that that is really the root of much of their profits. If you can get a bunch of people coming in and out all the time for service, the dealership's going to be doing very well. But once we introduced the supply constraints and the chip shortage, you name it, to lessen the inventory level of vehicles while demand remained equally high, that's what served as the blood in the water for the sharks. They got to see for the first hand, like, holy cow, I can get $10,000 and I can line my pocket with it. That's just pure profit. Heck yeah, I'm going to lean into that. That was the first taste. So now they have a very difficult time pivoting back to pre-pandemic sales practices of trying to push out quantity, right? Pushing the quantity of vehicles at great deals. They have a hard time adjusting to it. Not to mention, what did I say about their loyal customers? They flicked them. They're no longer coming back to their dealerships, and now they need them more than ever. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally remember every single dealership that deployed a markup or a market adjustment during the last few years. I remember each and every one of them. I try to write them all a 1-star review just to send a small message, but I remember all of them, and I know to never go to any of those dealerships ever again. And I know I'm not alone in feeling that way. One thing that I actually appreciated from some dealerships was they would actually limit their sales to a certain zip code. They would limit it maybe within a couple of zip codes from them to keep it local, or at least within their state. I kind of respected that. I had called countless dealers across the nation while I was leaning into my nationwide auto brokerage service that I had at the time, and I got to hear every single tactic. But I actually appreciated the dealerships that were doing that because they were giving their local population first dibs. I love that because they didn't just sell off the vehicle to the first guy with a ton of money coming from California to buy their vehicle, to fly in and buy it and go back home with it. I actually appreciated that. Keep the business local and keep those returning customers and keep that service department full. And if I recall correctly, the pandemic was difficult on everybody. It was tough times for everybody, but yet dealerships felt like they had the right to play victim. They could play victim as if they were the only ones struggling. They were the only ones struggling to make ends meet and to pay their employees. No, that was everyone. But yet they still took it out on you and I, the consumer, and hit us with markups. With the national average new vehicle purchase monthly payment being $760 and the national average used vehicle purchase being $525, it really should come as no surprise that people are defaulting on these loans. It's becoming unbearable when you combine the fact that insurance premiums have over doubled in the last 2.5 years. No thanks. And really throughout the last 3 decades, Americans have notoriously traded out their vehicles every 3 to 5 years. It is the whole keeping up with the Joneses concept, or the whole social media world, right? We are a TikTok generation where we constantly feel as though we need to compare ourselves to our neighbors, compare ourselves to what we see online, and we're constantly trading out our vehicles because of it. We want to have the latest and greatest technology, the latest and greatest vehicle out there, so we can brag and show off to our neighbors. And that has put ourselves in a very, very sticky position. And negotiating a car deal has become increasingly difficult, increasingly stressful over the last few years, because instead of going in, negotiating a sale price of a vehicle and working hard to get that great sales figure that you want, you now have to get thrown over to the finance department right afterward. And now you got to go through that gauntlet one more time with another individual from that dealership trying to rake you over the coals, trying to trick you into buying these extended warranties, trying to convince you to paying these protection packages, you name it, all to try to get a better interest rate on your vehicle. They're really just taking advantage of you. So you get run through the gauntlet not once, but twice. And I would argue if dealers were willing to pay their sales staff a livable wage and not have to lean on the whole commission sales approach, I think that would make for a much less stressful buying experience for many customers, right? But instead, you go in there and you start getting circled right as you pull into the dealership lot, because they're all trying to get that commission. They're trying to get to you first and be pushy and make a sale happen so they can get paid more. But if dealers actually paid them a livable wage, kind of like a restaurant paying their waiters and waitresses a livable wage, they wouldn't have to lean so much on their tips. They wouldn't have to lean so much on these commissions. So paying their sales staff a livable wage would really eradicate much of the issue, I think. People are tired of the gimmicky cash grabs, whether it's paying for nitrogen-filled tires or inflated prices for window tint, $1,200 for a window tint when it only costs a dealership $300 or $400. Same goes for the clear bra up front. Same goes for ceramic coating, subscription fees for ordinary creature comforts that you would generally get in any vehicle. Navigation, now you're paying a monthly service fee for it. That kind of stuff is driving people insane, and that is why they're no longer buying new. They're keeping their current vehicle on the road for much longer. Instead of trading in every 3 to 5 years, they're holding on to it 5 to 10 years. Because I assure you, paying for the necessary maintenance and service on your vehicle, your current vehicle, is going to be much more affordable comparatively to going out and buying a new vehicle now. The price tags have been shot to the moon, and they've completely gotten out of touch with reality. Just look at credit card use within the United States right now. We're seeing the highest level that we have ever seen. Currently, right now, the average American owes just over $7,300 on their credit card. Within a household, a combined credit card use of over $9,500. And that's really saying something, right? Generally speaking, a credit card has an interest rate of 20 to 25% APR. That is insane. So the fact that Americans are allowing those credit cards to get so high on a typical basis, that's quite telling. And there's a reason why Tesla's direct-to-consumer purchase model has succeeded within the United States. It's because it allows Americans to go buy a vehicle and cut out the riffraff. It cuts out the whole going to a dealership, trying to deal with a sleazy salesman and going back and forth with the sales manager, blah, blah, blah. It cuts out that huge, stressful experience. And that is why Tesla has done so well. But thanks to dealer franchise laws within most states, that protects dealerships. It protects dealerships and it prevents the direct-to-consumer purchase model from being implemented, right? It protects the economic impact of a dealership within your local region. All right, guys, I'll wrap up the video there. Let me know what your thoughts are. We are seeing so many car salesmen hanging up. They're finally quitting because, well, times got tough. They now have to work very, very hard in order to sell their inventory because people are just not flocking out like they used to. Selling cars is not easy. So let me know what your thoughts are. As always, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to tune these videos. If you found any value in it whatsoever, I do respectfully request that you please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a lot, and it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. Till next time.